going to start this off and ask you a really simple but quite a complex question also, which is, what does it mean to be judgmental?
Okay, yeah, so, I mean, before I go to the meaning of judgmental, I'd like to touch on the word judgment, right? Because what I find and what I'm finding at the moment, you know, as I research this more and more, and as I speak to people about these two words, I find that people often confuse the two. So let's just take the word judgment first. And if I start by sort of saying, you know, that all day, every day, we need to make judgments to survive. So, for example, you know, the moment we wake up in the morning, we need to make judgments about what we're going to wear, what we're going to eat, how much we're going to eat, what time we're going to leave the house, how fast we're going to drive. Yeah. And, you know, these are all judgments we have to make to keep ourselves safe, you know, healthy, happy, and within the law of the land. So, you know, being judgmental is actually something completely different. I think it might be a good starting point to kind of give you a few definitions that I found, say, in a dictionary of it.
Yeah.
And, you know, looking online, there was one that said to have or show an overcritical point of view.
Yeah.
Another one said being too willing to criticise the actions and behaviours of others and say they're wrong.
Okay.
There was another one that said using or making decisions or making comments or observations about the moral importance of something. And there was one more that said thinking ourselves morally superior because we haven't committed the acts of others. Yeah?
Okay, so if I imagine that in practical terms, surely that's what we do all the time, though.
Absolutely, absolutely, and this is, you know, this is the big paradigm. This is the big problem. You know, we're judgmental when we're unkind and too critical to someone, about someone, or even about something. It could be anything. So this is when we use strong language, abusive or hurtful words, or actions like violence or aggression that we know will cause a confrontation with another person. We also know that, you know, it's human nature for most of us to be judgmental with each other. It seems clear that most of the time we give a judgmental response without really thinking about what the consequences might be. And then when our judgmental words or actions have created a confrontation or an argument or a fight, we then have to deal with those consequences.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
It's strange because at that point we just straight into pointing the finger and just
completely
blurting something out.
Absolutely.
Even though we know that very thing will trigger a kind of like a chain response.
Yeah, and the really bizarre thing is that we're willing to do that, knowing that we're going to have to then face the consequences and the confrontation. It's actually quite funny when you think about it, how irrational we can be.
Is that conditioning, would you say? Is that just sort of almost like when you've done something a certain number of times, it just becomes a pattern that we sleepwalk in our lives?
I think it most definitely is, absolutely, you know, and actually most human beings are brought up from, you know, from being babies, from being toddlers, actually learning the habit of being judgmental.
Yeah.
You know, when we grow up.
What you mean from
absolutely,
our families?
100%. Well, you know, I mean, our family, our home life is our first school, isn't it? And I think it is. I think it's so deeply ingrained in not just our society, not just this society, but every society on the planet.
Do you think that, I mean, like, touching on that point there, do you think if you were looking at families in sort of vastly different cultures in terms of either religion or, you know, sort of geographically, do you think that you still would find more or less the same kind of patterns with, you know, differences here, differences there? But
that's a wonderful question, you see, and that's one question that I'm really looking forward to exploring in this book that I'm putting together on judgmentalism.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to this question that you've asked is actually going to constitute quite a big chunk of the book. My theory is that yes, I think that whether you go to a tribe in a remote rainforest, or if you go and observe a child of somebody that's wealthy in a developed country, I think you're still going to find judgmental responses being given.
Yeah. Okay, so have you got any kind of case studies or examples that you'd like to give us just for the listeners in terms of sort of painting maybe just an everyday picture? I mean, you're saying that we're judgmental in all of these things that you've described.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to maybe pick one and
Yeah.
show how that applies, you know?
Yeah,
That might be
yeah.
something from your own life or something you've observed in people you know. Or
Oh, absolutely, yeah, of course. I mean, but just to touch first on what we were talking about, which is, the fact is that the reason why I believe we're all judgmental, and we all tend to be judgmental, is because most of us have been brought up in a world where almost everyone is judgmental with each other. So from being babies and growing up in a family, going to nursery, school, college, we've all watched everyone around us and simply learned that this is a perfectly normal way to behave with each other. In fact, most of us don't even know the meaning of the word judgmental, because to be judgmental is how we all go through life. It's become it's kind of become the main way we survive as well. How we choose our friends, how we treat our family members, how we solve problems, even how we make ourselves feel better. We're judgmental to actually get that. Let's take you the way that you would choose a friend. Yeah. Okay, we might not just choose friends based on us liking that person. Quite often we might choose a friend based on what we think we might get out of the friendship.
Right.
Okay, so that's being judgmental. That's actually us judging that person and judging first what we want to get out of that relationship, which could be something really specific.
Yeah.
I mean,
are you thinking like romantically, for example?
Possibly.
Perhaps,
I mean,
or it might be,
but we could also be thinking economically. We could be thinking about sort of a, as far as sort of a career development goes.
Yeah.
And again, we learn strategies like this as children. If we've got siblings, you'll be especially kind to a sibling if you want them to do something for you.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, to give you a few examples, I mean, to say that we're sort of we're judgmental and how we're judgmental. I want to throw this in as well, though, that judgmentalism, it even extends to how we feel about ourselves. So we might not admit it out loud, but we often kind of doubt ourselves, our own abilities, our skills, even our intentions, which can all lead to us sort of damaging our own self-esteem, our self-worth, our confidence. And, these internal conflicts can then kind of make us defensive and more judgmental with others, for fear of being judged by them. So, in order to feel better about our own weaknesses, our own faults, we actually, our first port of call is to be judgmental against others. It's almost like a preemptive attack, And again, I mean, this is the whole point of it, which is this is the main reason why in our world today, that there's conflict everywhere between family members, neighbours, communities, businesses, even countries.
Yeah.
So it's
it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, there's that thing where you very often, what you're criticising in someone else, someone who really gets on your nerves, that will resonate because it's something that's perhaps in yourself.
Absolutely, yeah. So
the people that you really find irritating or dislike, there's something that's kind of rattling against you that might be, Okay, so if we zone in terms of just the Islamic angle on judgmentalism, could you talk to me a little bit about that
Absolutely,
particular perspective?
Yeah, indeed.
I mean, isn't judgmentalism needed in religion? What?
I think, again, I think we need to distinguish between judgmentalism and making a judgment.
Yeah.
You know, and again, I think what I'm trying to sort of to address and I'm trying to establish here is that judgmentalism itself is a negative. It's a negative thing. I mean, okay, you know, we look at the Islamic perspective on it. You know, like other faiths, Islam recognises that judgmentalism is actually one of the first ever sins committed. So, you know, Allah tells us that when Shaitan, you know, when Satan, one of Allah's creations, was instructed to prostrate before Adam, Shaitan actually refused, judging Adam to be inferior to himself, and therefore vowed, you know, to lead Adam and his fellow human beings astray. So, you know, one of the flag bearers of judgmentalism is old Satan himself. There are so many examples in the Quran. There's a particular one. It's a verse in the Holy Quran where God addresses his prophet, peace be upon him, directly after, you know, the historic battle of Badr, where some of the worst enemies of the Muslims were engaged in battle, and a small group of them were actually captured and taken as prisoners of war by the Muslim soldiers. And what's really remarkable here are the instructions that God gave to his prophet, peace be upon him, about how the prisoners should be spoken to. So God says that you must say the following. He said, you've got to say, if Allah sees any good in you, then he will guide you and help you find a way through your predicament. So these are, and remember that these prisoners had, you know, moments before been trying to kill these soldiers.
Yeah.
Right? They're now prisoners of war, but now suddenly the Muslim soldiers are instructed to offer the prisoners support and counsel, you know, in the most non-judgmental way possible. And, you know, any verbal or physical abuse of the prisoners was strictly prohibited. You know, I find that remarkable. And these are guys that were trying to kill you a few moments before.
Yeah. It's that's a good example, a really strong example, I think. Okay, let's kind of go to the other end of the park, so to speak, and take just an everyday example, or a few everyday examples where people are being judgmental. And I want you to think about people listening to this in terms of, particularly now, things that people are going to be experiencing a lot and find easy to relate to.
Yeah, during the lockdown, and
exactly.
Being cooped up together.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, when thinking about our lives today, you know that there are many ways that we can learn to deal sort of with life's problems without being judgmental. This is what I believe. But first, I mean, let's look at a few examples of people being judgmental, and you know, we'll see that these examples happen all day, every day, and everywhere, really. Let's throw a few examples in. A parent might say to their child, you know, you're rude and your attitude stinks. A brother might say to his sister, you know, oh, you know, I like your dress, but I think it looks horrible with that scarf. Let's say a husband says to his wife, you know, look, I can't stand your friend. You're always calling her over, and she's a bad influence on you. A wife might say to her husband, you know, you never help around the house, and when you do get anything done, you never do it properly. Yeah?
Yeah.
Again, a sister might say to a brother, it's disgusting how you leave your socks in the living room. If we think about sort of employers and, you know, in the workplace, the kind of judgmentalism you might find there, a boss might say to his employee, you know, you obviously have no idea how to talk to customers, do you? If we think about in the community, you know, somebody might say to their neighbour, you and your kids are a nuisance. You're always disturbing the whole street. And, you know, I thought of a few more examples of say, and these are kind of true examples and real examples that I've actually seen myself. You know, you've got the president of a country talking about a woman, saying, she's disgusting. I mean, both inside and out. You take a look at her, she's a slob. no prizes for guessing who that might be.
Guess who that is.
Absolutely. And what's I think what's probably quite relevant to our conversation here as well is giving you an example of religious folk and how even in my own experience I've seen this and I've heard it. A religious person saying to another religious person, well, you're living a very sinful life and you will go to hell for that.
Yeah.
So
can I ask you, I mean, difficult question perhaps, but what I want you to do is to take one of those examples you've just given me and sort of reframe it. So the same moment, same thing's happening, but instead of being judgmental, can you reframe that response into a non-judgmental response?
Absolutely. Yeah, indeed, of course I will.
Well, give us a few examples of
I mean, well, look, if we look at even a couple of the examples that we've already talked about, like for example a parent saying to her child, you're rude and your attitude stinks. An alternative response to that, a non-judgmental way that parent could speak to their child and deal with their child, is they could say, I feel very worried about the words you've used. I'd like to ask you why you felt you needed to use such words and how you think it made the other person feel. So let's work together to think of other ways to solve your problem so that you'll have a better idea about what to do next time. What the parent's doing there is they're holding back, right? They're choosing not to just blurt out, you're rude and your attitude stinks, okay? And they're choosing not to say that because they know that if they say that, it's going to cause an argument, a confrontation. What is it that parent wants, ultimately? That parent wants to teach their child something. That parent wants their child to learn not to do that again. So what instead they decide to do is to be non-judgmental, and they decide to actually talk to their child and say, look, this is what you've just said, okay? And it's not judgmental to tell the child what they've just said. That's just telling them the facts.
Or how they feel about that.
Or how they feel about it, absolutely. And so what the parent did there was they prioritised connecting with their child to teach them something.
Right.
And out of that, by doing that, there was no confrontation. There wouldn't have been a confrontation.
So we're talking about the connection, aren't we? As opposed to...
the blowout.
Yeah.
As opposed to the argument.
Sort of judgment, divide and rule.
100%. I mean, let's look at another example I gave, like the brother that says to his sister, I like your dress, but I think it looks horrible with that scarf.
Yeah.
And again, it's quite insulting, it's offensive. He's saying to her that, she's got terrible taste in scarves, or she's got no idea how to coordinate her clothes, right? And his sister could easily become offended at that. So an alternative way that the brother could have said was, I really like your dress, but I wonder if another colour scarf might look even better than that. So in his own way, he's not saying it looks awful, he's actually saying it looks nice, but he's saying, do you think there's another way, another option that might be even better?
Yeah.
And it really is all about just stepping back in the heat of the moment and imagining that you can deal with the situation in a way that's not going to offend or hurt or trigger the other person.
Yeah. I don't know if those are any other examples that you want to highlight there. I mean, I think that's quite clear from the example you've given, a domestic situation. Do you maybe want to take something from the wider community or workplace? Or...
Well, again, the example that we talked about of the boss saying to his employee, you obviously have no idea how to talk to customers, do you?
Yeah.
And again, in my research and the work, it's starting to sort of take quite a lot of work just looking at how employers and organisations engage so judgmentally with their workforces, with the people that work for them. So the boss that said, you've got no idea how to talk to customers, if we think about what the boss could have said that would have been non-judgmental, would be something like, I noticed that you sounded a bit stressed when you spoke to the customer. And, I'm not only concerned with us being polite to customers, but I'm also concerned if one of my employees is unhappy as well. And, so is everything okay with you? Is there anything that I can help you with? So again, what the boss has done is he's addressed the problem with the employee. So the employee instantly knows that he's noticed that I've spoken maybe inappropriately or unprofessionally with the customer. And he's addressing that with me, but he's addressing it with me in the most caring, the most empathetic way he possibly can. So my reaction simply cannot be to be offended at that. Do you know what I mean?
There's a story that I heard once about. This was something I heard in a training.
Yeah.
And it was the chap who was delivering the training was also a psychotherapist, but he gave an example where someone had stormed out of a workplace.
Right.
And just, probably been keeping things in for weeks, months. They just had a kind of meltdown and said, right, I feel this way, I feel that way, blah, 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 I don't like this, I don't like that.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be working past today. And the boss just simply almost repeated back, said, I hear what you're saying that you feel X, Y, Z, and just went through it. And just simply by saying that, the power of saying that, repeating that, told that employee just blown the gasket that they were being listened to, which was possibly the first time they were feeling like they had been listened to in a long time, and just it's a powerful process, isn't it? I think.
Of course it is. Of course it is. Because it truly is all about showing the other person that you are listening, and that you're prepared to put yourself in their shoes, and you're prepared to try to understand their world, So we can see from the non-judgmental responses that we've talked about that when we use more empathy and understanding, then offer to help solve the problem, we instantly reduce the chances of starting a confrontation, and we also get the result we needed from the situation. So it kind of becomes a win-win situation.
Yeah.
But, it's extremely important that we control our own ego as well, in the heat of the moment. This is an ego that wants us to believe and to prove that we're in the right and the other's in the wrong, that we're the better, more intelligent person than the other, that we're sort of superior to the other person,
Yeah.
And once we can control these urges and just think before we respond, once we focus on wanting to solve the problem rather than making it worse through trying to understand the other person's world, we will start to succeed in becoming less judgmental.
Would another way of putting it perhaps be that it's, rather than being absolutes, which is what you're being if you make a judgment, you are this, you are that, you are living a sinful life, whatever, that and religion teaches us this as well, that it's about us being fallible and being aware of our shared humanity, the fact that we are fallible and that we're not absolute.
I think what you've said there hits the nail completely on the head. That until we all acknowledge and make the admission that we can all day, every day, be wrong.
Yeah.
We can make mistakes. We can screw up.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? Until we're all prepared to put our hands up and say, you know what, that was my mistake.
Yeah.
And actually and have the guts to do that, in front of somebody else, and have the humility to do that in front of somebody else, things will never change. So I think you're absolutely right.
Okay, well, it's been great having this conversation, and it's good to air these thoughts, especially in these times, isn't it? I think just
completely.
We're always with them, but it just feels like we're kind of ever more in need of this, I think.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Rahel.